Oh man. So I mean, I think a common one that people know is that like Roadhog's footsteps have farts in them.
I didn't know that.
Really? If you listen to his footsteps, you'll hear like little squeaks, like whoopee cushion farts as he walks around.
Oh my god.
100%. Like it's part of his character.
Brian, nice to meet you. Spilo. Yes, absolutely.
I've seen your videos, man.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So, do you want to quickly introduce yourself here to what you do, and you can put that on. I think this should be okay. Testing. Okay, we're good.
Hey everyone, my name is Brian Weirs. I'm an associate sound designer here at Blizzard, working on Overwatch.
Okay, so sound design, is it just the crunchy stuff? So everything that we do, all the dopamine, it's your fault, basically.
Yes, absolutely. Every satisfying sound that gives you that dopamine hit, that is our fault.
Okay. So specifically, what kind of sounds do you work on? I guess even just in the last like 6 months to a year.
Yeah, so I've mainly been on the cosmetics train. So I've been working on a lot of mythic weapons, the mythic skin, stuff like that.
Okay. I'm gonna have to keep pushing though. What specific details? Which specific mythics? What
Absolutely. So I've worked on the Widowmaker mythic weapon that'll be coming out. I worked on the Ashe mythic weapon, the Soldier mythic weapon. I worked on the Reaper mythic skin, the Ashe mythic skin as well.
Nice. That's incredible.
Those are like the big ones, yeah.
Okay, cool. So if for anybody that's sound team carries Overwatch, I said somebody in chat, which is really true. In terms of sound design, obviously there's a lot of visual clarity, and it's also just very satisfying with what you do. How did you get started with this job?
Yeah, so I'll keep it short, but because it was kind of like over years of just being really interested in game dev, playing music with friends in a band and recording music and stuff like that.
Awesome.
Learning the bit of the audio, the ropes of audio, just messing with it in software. And then just kind of combining those two, finding a community on Discord who gave really good feedback for like sound redesigns and stuff. Learning more like the game dev technical side of things. And then eventually landing an internship here. Which was amazing.
So then you go from there, and obviously you guys kind of scale up. Do you guys have a philosophy in how you implement sound design in Overwatch? Because I'm a moron when it comes to sound design, but it's like even a layman like me, a complete Gentile, can appreciate like, wow, when I play other games, everything sounds so much juicier. There's so much more clarity in Overwatch, but I don't know why, and I don't know how. So
I mean, I'll be honest, it's a mystery to me too, man.
Like, I'm not the only one.
I only came here like about 2 years ago or whatever, and I mean, really the core design philosophies of the game came from Scott Lawler and Paul Lackey, who were the first ones on the team. And so now I've just been trying to follow in the footsteps, listen to their feedback and all that. And
quite literally.
Yeah, but I mean, it is a lot of like finding the core elements of the sound that'll work and paring back and like whittling away the stuff that just adds noise, right? So like
interesting.
And trying to find the coolness in the sounds while also finding that clarity.
So less is more, and a lot of the time.
Less is more, and that's a big philosophy for a lot of like the longtime sound designers here. For sure, that I'm trying to learn. I just kind of throw plugins and a bunch of stuff on it. Like, oh, it sounds cool, but then they're like, no, that's
too much
not
information.
Yeah.
Does that? Where's like I guess the line between like this is really creative versus this compromises, like, I don't know how to describe it, not the competitive integrity, but the crispness of what the sound is. How do you decide on that?
Oh, I mean, that's just a lot of like collaborative thought there. Because it's, you go into you do your thing, you're working on it, ask for feedback from people, and they find different things that kind of stick out. The experience of people on the team will let you know, like, we've tried that before, right? That doesn't work.
Any things you want to share where that has been, maybe some ideas, fresh new ideas that you're like, oh wait, that's not going to work? Any miserable failures that you're going to expose to the community here?
That's a great question. I've failed a lot of times. Let's be real. But like I was working on, I worked on the Wrecking Ball rework. So like his the shield, shooting the shield off, and then also like the grapple hook stuff. And so, I did some first passes on that. I worked with the main hero designer, or hero sound designer, Chris De La Pena. And he gave me a lot of good feedback on just like making sure it sounded like Wrecking Ball, using some of the existing kit for that, but also like how the rhythm of the sound will indicate what it's doing, right? So like, if a sound is like it's an expulsion, right? It's like releasing something. Then there's a certain cadence and transient to the sound that you can put in there to help indicate that.
It's consistent with what it actually does.
Right. And so like you hear that all the time in like the healing sounds. We have like a bunch of different types of healing sounds.
It sounds refreshing. I don't know how there's an adjective associated with it, but it is.
You get that.
Yeah.
Get that.
Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, what are some things that maybe players wouldn't otherwise appreciate or otherwise recognize within the sound design that you think plays a big impact? Whether it's, you know, a health pack. I think the Wrecking Ball example was really good. I never thought about the consistency of the sound with what it actually does. Maybe with weapons. How do you, when you talk about weapon design, what kind of things are you looking for?
Yeah, so weapons, I mean, weapons have been my life for the past like 4 months working on the mythic weapons.
Yeah.
But they have to have the impact, right? But they have to have a certain impact that matches the visuals. So take, for example, Widowmaker's fully scoped rifle shot versus Juno's like pew pew shot, right? It's different levels of power and intensity, and so that's a huge part of getting it right. Is how do you balance the power and power of that with like the mech sounds, any sort of characteristic sounds for it, like energy sounds or whatever or what have you, and then different. But like every hero is so different. Like Malga's weapon fire, nightmare. Like that is just like
it was intense.
It took a long time to iterate on that and make sure that that it sounded good while not being like too overbearing. I mean, even still, it's pretty wild.
It's pretty loud, but like it's finding the line that like fulfills the hero fantasy without compromising things.
Yeah.
When it comes to like trying out new things and experimentation, how do you know when the line is crossed? Like, do you guys just go in and play the game and just get a feel for how things go, and do you just plug and play?
Yeah, we definitely play test pretty often, and like the hero team itself, like the strike teams that work on the heroes, they're playing it, they're giving a lot of feedback, and so you are constantly getting this back and forth of like, this is too much, this is not enough, right? Like all these different things. Like I don't know when this is happening. This needs an indication of what's going on. Like every hero has their own little unique quirk of like, we don't know what's happening here. And so we need sound to support that. And, sound, and we try and get VFX to help out when we can.
So VFX, if any of you guys haven't done it, I highly recommend going back to like the old 1940s, 1950s, like the cartoon via sound effects guys and all the crazy things that they did. Nowadays, obviously, it's much more digital, but are there any like fun facts or like this sound was actually this, or this one was the hardest sound to get right? You talked about Malga's incendiary gun. Are there any other cool little tidbits that maybe the average player might not pick up on?
Oh man, so I mean, I think a common one that people know is that like Roadhog's footsteps have farts in them.
I didn't know that.
Really? If you listen to his footsteps, you'll hear like little squeaks, like whoopee cushion farts as he walks around.
Oh my god!
100%. Like it's part of his character.
I got a lot of what's in chat, so clearly that was not common knowledge. All right, see now you've opened Pandora's box here. You got to keep spitting.
Yes, I mean he's a nasty fellow. I mean let's be real.
Yeah, makes sense.
So all right, we'll give you another fart one. I worked on a Reaper emote where he pulls out a heart balloon and like he stabs it with the arrow.
The Cupid one, the Cupid skin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I worked on that one, and just to get it like kind of comedic and just like get the feeling across. Yeah. I added like I think like a really small fart sound at the beginning of it.
So
you do it.
So when you pop.
Yeah, so when he pops it, right, and he squeezes it, you get like
this conversation went in a completely unexpected direction. I mean, this is why we need Brian here, guys. This is incredible.
It's Overwatch, baby.
This is great. This is great. All right, okay. There has to be more here.
Oh man. So another fun one that I did is so Ash Mythic Skin. Her like Power Rangers-esque one.
Oh my gosh, the sponge skin, I like to call it.
The sponge skin.
It makes so many squishy noises.
It is kind of squishy. But her rifle, her reloading. Yeah. When she feeds it, it makes like a chomping noise. Yeah. That's me.
Wait, really? That's actually you?
Yeah, that's me.
All right, listen, chat. Right now, you have to pull it up. Right now, that's this guy.
So not to ruin that skin for you.
So wait, you're telling me that you are a professional ASMR? Just people just don't know it, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's wild. That's crazy. All right,
professional ASMR artist here.
Okay. Anything else? Even just little things like how do you create some of the gun sounds? What were some of the maybe this was like, oh, this was a garbage truck sound that we used for this, or we used this for that. Because so far this is like right up my alley here.
Well, so a really fun one is well, actually, so for Freya, give you some new stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Her bola on her ultimate,
the little trap thing.
Yeah, like so you need to get all those sorts of spinny sounds, right? And so like, how do you get that? Well, you got to spin stuff.
Yeah.
And so Felipe, one of the senior sound designers, he bought a bullwhip, so like one of the really long whips.
Yeah.
And he recruited me to go to the Foley room that we have here and spin it around and just like get some cool spinning sounds.
So Indiana Jones mode here.
Yeah. However, Foley room is actually not that big. And so we were spinning it around and we ended up like smacking stuff and just not getting a clean recording. And so we decided to, don't tell Blizzard this, but we decided to find an empty conference room that wasn't being used, and we just set up in there. And so someone could have walked in on us sitting on the ground, spinning a whip above our head, and someone pointing a microphone at it.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. I think there's been, okay, so I'm seeing my chat is talking about psychology and tanks, bunch of nerds. There were some changes a while back, I think, about the sound design of shooting armor and shields. And there were some small adjustments. I can't remember, it's been a while since I've tested it in the practice range. Did you work on that? I don't know if you did or not.
So I didn't work on that. That was a project of our audio director, Scott Lawler. He kind of went in there and reworked them. Because if I remember correctly, they were in the game before, but they were just like inaudible. He's like, could not hear them. And so he did some remixing on that, and like testing and making sure that it was working right to kind of just bump it up in volume.
Sure.
Make it feel better.
Sure. Okay, chat's being weird. Okay, any other questions, chat, that you have about sound design? Any other stuff? You guys say scripted interview, but yet we're talking about hog farts, and like bullwhips in conference rooms. Some discussion about Sonic Arrow. When designing, how do you account for sound changes in the map? I don't know if that's a question that you could answer. It's a little vague.
Yeah, if you can explain what sound changes in the map are, I would gladly answer.
Did I find a stock fart? Or did you record a dev fart?
There were stock farts. Okay. I think recorded dev farts
that's
might
a little
be a little far.
I was gonna say
that might be a little something, but we have a library. We have like 600,000 sounds in our library, so we just have so many random sounds.
What work were you most proud of?
Ooh. Honestly, the Ash Mythic weapon came out kind of cool, and the Reaper Mythic skin.
It's very unique.
Yeah, it like was really hard to find the like toe the line of like romantic Valentines, but also like cool and edgy and like fun and sparkly and all these different motifs kind of coming together. So that was a lot of fun. Hardest
sound to design. You talked a lot about Malga's weapons. Any other difficult ones to balance?
To balance.
I guess just not necessarily to balance, but weapons that were just awkward to design and balance, I guess.
Soldier's mythic weapon was pretty hard. That because like there's a difference between, for like the Widowmaker sniper rifle, like a one shot, just like a long tail transient weapon. You can put a lot of character into it. But then a automatic rifle, because of our game and how it's implemented, you can't just sometimes you can just make like a looping file that has like the sounds in it. But sometimes you need to make like one shots that re-trigger over and over again. And so you have to like layer all these different one shots together and have them play over and over again to create that like assault rifle sound. And so trying to find how to make it feel satisfying and chunky while also hitting the theme and motif of it being like a spirit eater, right? And like it's using spirits as its energy. And so
it sounds both like a mechanical weapon and also like something more unexplained. Something outside the realm of just normal.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
An EQ and sound menu.
That would be a little intense.
That would be intense. That's a whole rabbit hole that like other games have gone through. Like Apex Legends with like volume sliders for footsteps and stuff. It's like you can just turn everything off and then just have footsteps.
Right.
Yeah, it could be tough. But I am a proponent of accessibility in audio.
Sure.
And so like trying to find opportunities for that. That's a big thing. And also just to hit on something. I know. Like the clarity of Overwatch, the audio has always been amazing. I know Overwatch 2, there's been like some talk of like it, kind of getting a little messy sometimes. And so we are looking at, like, actively looking at different changes that can be made to, like, clean it up a little bit more.
What kind of spots or particularly do you feel like are difficult for you guys?
We find that in Overwatch 2, we use a lot of, like, reverbs and delays and stuff. And so the delays were in Overwatch 1, but our convolution reverbs for, like, weapons and stuff like that, in a large battle, it can get kind of messy, you know, like with all these weapons going off. And then it's like, okay, so this is a psychology thing that I enjoy talking about with sound, but when you're in a high intense battle where you have like 6 people around you at once, all of these things going on, how important is it that you can hear that Roadhog's footsteps have this particular reverb to let you know he's in this room next to you?
Right.
Is it more important to know he's in that room, or is it more important to pull back on that reverb and know he's in that direction and have it be more clear? Or do you want to hear that he's in that room?
I feel like you guys do a good job with like lethality scale in general for the most part, where, you know, ultimate voice lines very aggressive, very loud, and usually the more dangerous, the more lethal the character in proximity, generally the louder those footsteps are. Things like Widowmaker headshots generally very loud for that exact same reason. I assume that's a conscious decision.
Yeah, for sure. Like the whiz-by sounds, I think, are a huge part of the game. Like they really help like indicate you know, like when you're being shot at, right? And our priority system that we've talked about before, like that's been in the game since when it first launched. It does a great job at like making sure that lethality scaling, like you're talking about, you know, when you're being looked at and shot at, that's more important than maybe someone who's right next to you, but they're focusing on an enemy.
And even between enemy and friendly sounds, there's a clear discrepancy of volume. I know that something, we're not going to be too critical of Rivals, but one of the things that drives me nuts about that game is some of the friendly sounds of like a friendly like squirrel roll, for example, really noisy, and I'm like, well, that's my own teammates. So that's something that obviously you guys said. And I think at times there's even been stuff where like people complain about Reaper footsteps being silent or Roadhog footsteps being silent in the past. Like that was a huge problem, right? It's better now, I feel, but you know, obviously if that consistency of lethality is not there, it's really irritating.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like a big thing that we try and keep track of. And like with Juno, for example, like her weapon fire, that was a big like discussion in the mix room when we were mixing her volumes. Is okay, how loud is the friendly weapon fire going to be versus her enemy weapon fire? Because like as a friendly, you want to know that she's shooting at you because she's healing you, right? Like you want to have that indication that's there. But then once it gets too loud, then you feel like you're being shot at by an enemy, right? And so we actually made some changes, like EQ changes, of like her friendly weapon fire has a little less bass to it, it has a little less sharpness, so it's a little more round. So that way when she's shooting at you, it'll hopefully subconsciously like have Pavlovian response, or like subconsciously understand as a player that that's a friendly versus an enemy.
Right. I've noticed that even in the ult design initially, it feels a lot more palpable orbital array or whatever, whether you're in it or you hear it from the enemy. It's like it does feel more appropriate to what it did than what it did initially. Favorite Overwatch sounds to listen to, like whether you worked on them or not, things that just feel good.
Dude, the new perk sounds,
There have been some questions about that,
Bro, but like specifically the UI for the perk sounds, like when you select it, satisfying.
I'm looking forward to it.
It's so good. I think like almost all the UI.
Was that more digital, the sound itself, like synth or something along those lines?
I'm actually not sure. That was done by another sound designer.
Okay,
but yeah,
we'll have to try it out at some point.
Sounds really good. And yeah, the new perk sounds, I mean, there was so much work that went into that. That was done by Chris De La Pena and Joe Concha. Chris De La Pena is our like lead hero sound designer who's done Mercies and Yada, like a bunch of the OGs. He's absolutely amazing. And then Joe Concha, who's our technical sound designer, who helped a lot with like making sure the implementation was working well, because these are all new systems, like these perks and stuff. It takes a lot of work to get in there and make sure that they work. Work properly and how we expect them to.
I think the key thing of Overwatch is like how much stuff is communicated with your eyes closed. You know, whether you're low, with somebody, whether you're healing somebody who's. I mean, if you think about it, like all of a sudden, I'm thinking right now, I'm like, oh my gosh, Mercy's beam sounds different the lower the HP the target is, and it's like so many things that you kind of take for granted that just allows you to process multiple variables at the same time that otherwise wouldn't be possible. So that's always great. Question for you. Are there any other games that you feel like do great with sound design? Either old games or games that you played? Like what kind of inspiration do you take? Or is it just Overwatch's you look back to Overwatch and be like, hey, I got to learn from the previous sound designers.
Yeah, well, I mean, I get the benefit of learning directly from them,
right?
You know, on my day to day, which is awesome. But yeah, Doom Eternal is actually, it sounds amazing. Like it's just super crunchy, super good.
Right.
I mean, yeah, Halo's got absolutely iconic sounds, like the shield recharging sound and all that. Oh my god, you can hear it in my sleep, bro. It's so good.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I take a lot of inspiration from games that are not FPS games.
Interesting.
Like Dishonored, like the original Dishonored is like it sounds absolutely amazing. The UI, the way the music works with it, and everything.
Right.
It's just like really inspiring, and it's
it feels like the biggest thing with sound design is like finding the balance between competitive integrity and really like role play. Like you're talking about like the sound of what a shield sharing with Wrecking Ball is. It's like I am doing the shield thing. Like it sounds like I am so invested in, like you kind of lose yourself in the action of what you're doing. It almost feels like you are the character at that point in time.
Yeah,
you know?
And that ties into like the feedback, right? It's like we need it to feel responsive and quick.
Total
and
immersion,
you know,
right, chat? Yeah, exactly. That's crazy. Okay, any other big questions here, chat? Are you in the music studio all day testing?
Well, I'm actually not in a music studio.
Okay.
But I mean, I guess it could be used as a music studio. But
are you spinning whips in conference rooms all day long?
Pretty much. Basically, but yeah, actually, a lot of my work in day to day is done in engine. So it's like for some it might be the less like glorifying type of work.
Yeah.
But it's the really important stuff. It's like, okay, how do we make sure that these sounds aren't re-triggering on each other? They're not breaking when like certain states happen or like state changes. Like that sort of stuff is a nightmare sometimes, and it takes a lot of iteration to get that stuff working. Like with Juno, her the orbital ray, like you have all these different status effects that are playing on people. They're getting healed, they're getting damage boost, they're getting all this sort of stuff on them at one time, and it's like, okay, how do you indicate the friendly player orbital ray along with the status effects that are on you, and for the Juno indicating that you're healing people and all this sort of stuff.
Sure. Are there any, you talked a little bit about with the Bola with the new hero. Is there any other details that you'd be allowed to share about the sound design? If not, I'm not sure what's crossing any lines here. Yeah.
No, I mean, you can hear everything that's in there, you know? So like, I'm trying to think. Oh, so part of the spinning things is not only the bullwhip spinning, but also Felipe, the sound designer who worked on it, who also did Ilari and Venture.
Yep.
He took string and he would tie like, like wing nuts. Mm-hmm. So like wing nuts or washers that have like, they'll have the hole in them or whatever.
Yeah.
These like weird irregular shapes on the end of a string. And when you spin those, you get like really interesting, like zipping, buzzing sounds from them. So if you're at home and you have the means and you won't break anything, feel free to tie a nut to a string and spin it around in your house and get yelled at by your parents.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say.
It sounds really cool. It sounds really dope. And that's how we also get like some of the whiz-by sounds and stuff. It's just like, or actually a lot of the whiz-by sounds in the game are a slingshot with like a wing nut or a washer being shot through the air, and so like you get that like really cool zipping sound.
It kind of gives you like a more visceral of something moving through the air.
Absolutely, it's like a bee. Going past your ear, right? It's like very visceral.
Yeah. Let's see, any priorities and sounds get louder when lots of things happening. I think we kind of talked about that. That's like the lethality scale, kind of the psychology of it, which is my favorite word. How do you make sounds for rewards like level up ranks and level ups? I guess maybe not as something that you've worked on as much.
Yeah, not as much, but I mean, the UI sounds and things like that are super important, right? Because it's like it's something players are going to be hearing a lot, but it also needs to sound really satisfying. Like that's the good stuff right there.
Sure.
And so
Sure. All right, last question here. Who do you main? Do you have a main?
My boy Zenyatta.
Zenyatta? That's it.
Zenyatta.
Same here.
Ever since day one, man.
That's it.
Day one, playing 2016 on the Xbox.
Most played hero.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It. What do you think about the Mythic?
Oh, it's awesome. That was done by the other associate sound designer, Donovan Robinson.
Yeah.
He killed it. He did such a great job with the sounds for that one.
Okay, I'm excited. I'm really, really excited. So I think Zenyatta's, like you were saying earlier, sound design already super fluid, very snappy, but also like, you know, again, the role play, it feels smooth. Harmony Orb and Discord Orb feel very spiritual almost in their application. So I'm really looking forward to it. So
absolutely.
Well, Brian, I appreciate it. Chat.
Cool. Absolutely. Thank you so much
Brian
for having
being
me.
here.
Thank you, chat.
Obviously, there's just one of the many people that have put out a lot of work. And good luck with the rest of your work, man. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Absolutely.
Have a good rest of your day.
See you guys.
Two.
Yes. Dion, hello. Nice to meet you. Very Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, of course. Of course. Of course.
I guess you'll get to pick a new power this round.
Yeah, I was honestly, I was talking to make sure that your chat can see you here. I'll be honest, let me make sure that, yeah, hang on. So might have to turn this a little bit here. There you go, that's perfect. But I was telling them, I'm kind of just pressing buttons here. I don't know which ones are good and which ones are bad. But that's kind of the fun, I guess, is that there's like so many different choices. So, okay, I'm gonna think about what we want to do here.
I haven't played Junker Queen much in this, so I don't have any recommendations.
All right. Let's see here. Charging, holding, drag. Let's see here. That's pretty good right there. Let's see here. Each enemy hit with Jagged Blade reduces cooldown. That's pretty good right there. I'll take that one. Absolutely. And then I think everything else that's pretty much all our cash right there. Oh yeah, that's right. So if I go in here, I can choose one of these and then refund from there. Gotcha. Okay.
Full amount.
Okay. Interesting. So, what do you do with
I'm the
Overwatch?
art director for the game, so
Awesome.
I help make characters, make environments, build a lot of the team that works on the UI and user interface. So
Sure.
anything art.
Did you do anything specifically with Stadium?
Not specifically. It's just directing.
Yeah, just basically helping. Okay. When it comes to direction here, this is going to be the ultimate multitask challenge, I guess, for me here.
These teams are giving it their
Which is
all
that
for
there's
a
something
shot at the
quintessential
win.
Overwatch, I guess, about multitasking. What specifically kind of, not theory, but sort of spirit do you bring to the Overwatch team that's unique to Overwatch when it comes? Because obviously every game wants to have a successful art
Only 20
design.
seconds left
But
until we
what is
kick
your
this
vision
round
when it
off.
comes to the art design?
Yeah, we
Here,
specifically
can you put this on really fast here?
try to
Pop that down. Sorry for that. Thank you.
the silhouette of the characters and things
Sure.
like this is super important to us, so we always striving to make sure you can recognize the character from a distance.
Right.
You just see their silhouette, you it's Junker Queen,
Yes.
it's Reinhardt.
Yes.
Even with skins, which is super challenging, it has to be
Especially
unique.
with how crazy some of these newer
some of the
skins are.
become. So that includes their animations and things. We try to make sure they all have unique animations that you can recognize. So it actually helps the gameplay over time where
So it's not just about like having an artistic vision because you take pride in what you do, but also it's competitive integrity even.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit of this with Brian earlier, and he was talking about how sound design is both a passion project,
It's huge,
but also something that makes the game better as well.
Yep.
All right, this is insane.
Oh my god. So we're trying to make it look cool, but how does the art help the gameplay as well?
All right, let's see. Can I get this? This is basically coach play. What this means is I miss every shot, but I hold the right angle, so that's all that matters. Oh dear. Well, it was fun while it lasted. Let me turn this down just a tad bit here. So
Okay.
So how long have you been working with Overwatch?
I've been on it before it was actually named Overwatch, so I was
my gosh.
assistant art director on Overwatch 1
That's incredible.
and became full art director for Overwatch 2.
Okay.
And
And what was that transition like for you? Was there anything that has changed when you were, I guess, starting off and as opposed to like taking on the lead?
it was pretty intense at first because instead of focusing on a smaller number of areas, you need to look at the game more holistically, basically.
Right.
From lighting to the user interface to animation. So
Was that a change of the direction of the game as a whole, or just a change in your responsibilities?
my responsibilities, yes.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So that's kind of relatively stayed the same, but you had a lot more to do with everything.
Yes,
for lack of a
right.
better term. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
What were the lessons learned, I guess, in that transition? Because obviously, when you're not lower on the totem pole, but you have more diverse responsibilities, things or less diverse responsibilities. You can kind of focus on your responsibility.
Right. Yep.
And then now as direction, there's like a lot of leadership involved. And what has that been like? What are those lessons been like? I guess, what, 4 years? 5 years?
5 years, yes.
5 years.
Yeah, I think learning to let the team do what they know best. Basically.
That's the ultimate leadership thing. It's like knowing when to step in and knowing when to step back.
Yes, right. You don't have the answer for everything. You don't need to.
Sure. Is there anything unique with the art direction? We kind of talked about like being consistent competitively and from an artistic standpoint, but also Overwatch has a pretty unique visual style. How would you describe it?
I think it's this kind of East meets West style, a bit of anime versus what a Western aesthetics would be.
And how would you describe a Western aesthetic?
Usually the characters are a little bit more realistic in their depiction, and while anime stylizes the anatomy a lot more.
Exaggeration.
There's more exaggeration, so we kind of combined the two. So our characters are stylized and a bit exaggerated, but not extreme. You know?
I think a lot of people talk about like Overwatch as being like as critically as like a cartoony thing, but I think ultimately for me, if it had been cartoony, I don't think I would be playing it.
Yeah.
So it's that balance that it's what makes it feel almost like mythical in a way, for lack of a better term, where it resembles real life, but also is more confident in taking that real life and exaggerating it. Let me pivot over here to full camera because I'm such a huge fan of the art style of things. I was talking earlier about my history with Overwatch and being the coach and the competitor, but really the art and the voice acting and the design, it's like that's really what got me into the game. I remember distinctly immediately falling in love with Genji's visual design and the way that he looked and the way that he acted and really all the characters. And so I kind of had this like phrase where I think that like I think we're all secretly role players.
Yeah, right.
And I think without your design and your leadership, I don't think this game has the same level of appeal, you know, if you strip it back. So you talked about East versus West. It's like the exaggerated, but not too exaggerated artistic design. You talked about the impact of like the competitive integrity of making sure that everything looks distinctly unique. And I'm not going to name any names, but not every game follows that, right? And I think you guys do that distinctly well. What else? Are there any other guiding, I guess, beacons of choice that you guys have maybe not even always had, but kind of adapted over the years?
Yeah, one thing people may not notice, but we do this thing that we call navigational lighting in the game. So when you play the levels enough, you might see the cues that we do to teach you how to travel around the level. So at the same time, we're trying to create a beautiful light setting. But we're teaching you how to move through the environment. A doorway may be dark on purpose, or there's a light over a pathway that subliminally draws your attention to it. The way we create the paths on the ground, the way we lay stones out, or even the locations where we place props. It's not arbitrary.
Do you have a good example of that stands out to you? Personal favorite, maybe?
Gibraltar is one of my favorite ones. I remember at some point, we did a version of Gibraltar where we dropped the sun down really low, and it created that really intense kind of sunset moment there. But if you look at that scene, every doorway has kind of a highlight around it that's cooler in temperature, while the rest of the map is more warm because of the sunlight.
That makes sense.
Whenever you're in the interior, it's cool. And whenever you're in the exterior, it's warm. Or
reminds me of Anubis' second point, even, where there's no guess about where the point is or where you need to go. But then I think at that one side room, right side from a defender's perspective, there's something very appealing about like what's in that dark room. You know, it's very like spooky, and it's like as a flanker, it almost feels like you're kind of role playing and like I am taking the dark path to the back line.
And you've learned to level more, so you start to branch out, right? But the main path is always kind of brightly lit or very clear where to go.
Do you? I find so many things, and I'm not trying to fanboy here, but I find so many things. The more I study Overwatch, the more I realize how many things that I take for granted, like navigational lighting, that make the viewer, the new player, and even the experienced player experience so much more intuitive, and you don't appreciate it until you step away from it. And you go, oh my gosh, what have I missed?
Yeah, it's subliminal sometimes.
And it's hard. I feel like you take pride in the work that you do, but I do think that it's because it is so subliminal, maybe people don't appreciate it. And so you can kind of talk about those things. Is there any of those things that we talked about lethality with Brian earlier on sound design, where like the more lethal things generally are slightly louder. You don't even necessarily notice that. Are there any other artistic choices, whether from just enjoying where you're at or from a competitive integrity standpoint, that maybe aren't highlighted as much?
Yeah, there's something about the world of Overwatch that people may not realize, but when we look at a location, and that also leads into the art style, that it does take place in what we think is the real world. It's New York, it's Cairo. But what we do is we look at the space and we kind of do a time jump on it. We imagine the place 80 years from now. We don't know the exact timeline, but imagine, for example, Midtown. Yeah. We looked at New York and we found some of the greatest architecture was this kind of Art Deco style. But we imagined that we didn't go away from that. We imagined if New York continued to build with Art Deco in mind and do a time jump on that. So jump 80 years from now and they're still building with this type of architectural aesthetic. Yeah. But what does it look like in our world? You know?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think it's like kind of like a spin of really an alternative version of like what the 1950s would view the future as, where it's kind of a caricature. And now that we're in the modern space era, we're like, it's actually not that different. It's a more modern spin, but it's still recognizable as New York. There's not like these, I see like a Tesla truck sometimes, I'm like, that's what people in the 50s probably thought future cars would look like, but they don't actually look like that, So it's recognizable as the future, but it is still New York, right?
Or Paris, which returns in Stadium. The typical way would be to make a very futuristic city and you slap the Eiffel Tower in the middle and you say it's the future. But instead, for Overwatch, we took Art Nouveau era of Paris and applied 80 years of advancement on that.
And I imagine that must be so satisfying as an artist, not just because we appreciate it, but it's like, in a way, putting in more effort also makes it more fun, because it requires you to kind of delve a little deeper and probably like a much more satisfying result. Like I can't imagine if we were to break down every detail on just Midtown, for example. Like, I mean, you probably could name 50, 60 things if you had enough time. It could go back, like, this is reference to this. We did this style because of this. Are there any particular instances on any particular maps where maybe it's not a huge eye-grabbing reference to something in the real world, but maybe somebody would like to appreciate?
Route 66 is basically kind of a Western dry area. And so for this one, we probably went a little bit more what you generally would expect, but I think what we call the visual navigation of the level, the progress the players make as you complete objectives. So when you first get the payload, you're surrounded by the destroyed trains and the nice restaurant, right? And that one, we really figured out a lot of things, like when the character dies and they spawn back in the restaurant, it's a clear state change for the world. Like when you're out in the main level, it's rocky canyons and things, but when you die, you're in this completely different environment. So it helps you understand where you are. But as you move through the level, there's gates that open as you make progress, so it feels like on top of you defeating the other team, the world state changes as you...
So it's very the train wreck, the almost city / town section, and then internally
the hideout. Right. And you see the lighting changes pretty dramatically as you get to the end of the hideout. There's this blue light. It actually doesn't make any sense. If you look around, there's no sense of where that light comes from, but it adds so much drama when you're fighting over the final capture point.
I'm not thinking about that. Like, we don't see that with every map, but it's really, it's a storyline is what it is. Like lore-wise of like, the train wreck and then leading to the hideout. So like even the pushing of the payload is like, sometimes you forget, you lose your sense of objectivity about like what's actually happening. Why am I pushing this payload? And maps like Route 66 will tell you if you pay attention. Right, that's fascinating. Any lessons or things that maybe have shifted in vision? Maybe not so much shifted so much as like you fine-tuned since 2016 or even earlier, I guess.
It's things that are probably not overly noticeable to everyone, but we've done a better job at lighting the characters in the world. When you see them in the space, they never quite drop to the color black, like 000 black. We always keep them very close to something that's in part of the Overwatch art style, is that we never truly drop anything to black. It's a dark red, it's a dark blue.
Never fully desaturated.
Never full, right? So I think we fully achieved that in Overwatch 2, this kind of goal that we had of making sure things stay lit while still having dramatic changes in the lighting, but it never goes to this perfect dark.
It's that balance of like colorful, but there's, I think, I'm completely speaking out of turn here. I'm not an artist, but it seems like the emphasis, like contrast, is what draws your attention. It's like if everything was nothing but color and cartoon. I'm even looking at this freeze frame here from a flat stream, and it's like what makes this map exceptional is those splashes of color that contrast from the sandstone, essentially, right? And so do you have, when you use these colors, you talked about how you use it for pathing and for lighting in terms of telling players where to go. Do you use color in other ways besides just, oh, it looks good? Is it to highlight objectives, important buildings, beautiful statues?
Right.
How do you use those highlights, those contrasts?
Another thing may not be noticed on everyone, but this particular map, one side is more cool and filled with organics, and the other side is more sandstone and warm in the color. So that's how you can tell.
So different side of the objective.
Yes, right. So there's a split between the map. The map is essentially mirrored.
Sure.
And one side actually has a more warm tone sandstone color that's recognizable. It's Cairo. And then the other side is more cool with blues and a lot of organics, like the
I see that,
the trees and things like that.
Right.
As you get used to the map, that helps you understand, again, another way of showing your progress. Yeah, how much, especially on the full version of Clash.
Right.
As you push the person back.
I'm so glad that you guys have repurposed these maps in Stadium, because
I missed the Paris,
because I remember when we play tested this last year, and I walk in that main room and I look over and I see Anubis. I'm like, oh my gosh!
Yes,
there's this sense of scale with how big that statue is. It's intimidating. It's just one of my favorite things in any map. Were there any things that, like, I guess, like, you talk about individual things that might have changed over time. Do you ever look back at old maps? Everyone talks about reworks from a competitive integrity standpoint.
Right.
Do you ever look back at old maps, 2CP or not, and you go, that's embarrassing, that's terrible. We shouldn't have done that, or I'm glad I can't see that. It's just like things that you, with the experience that you have now, think that you could do better.
Yeah. Under the hood, Cairo was a difficult map. It was the first Temple of Anubis was the first map we completed for the game, and we learned a ton about helping the player while still making good-looking art.
Right.
So it's funny, Cairo, the things we just talked about, if you look back at Temple of Anubis, we used to call it Cairo as the code name for it. Yeah. It's pretty monochromatic, the map. It's just kind of brownish orange almost the entire way outside of the spawn room, right?
Correct.
And we learned later that it could be draining on you to just play this map on top of the other challenges.
I'm just contrasting it right now with this version of it, right?
Cairo, right?
Even the blue, it completely shifts the.
So it was exciting to get a chance to revisit that aesthetic and kind of do it with the things we've learned.
It really is. It's a finished product. You compare it to like hero design and balance. Like nothing in this day and age is really set in stone.
Yes, right.
Except for the art in many ways. Like I mean, you guys talk about like the Overwatch 2 skins versus the Overwatch 1 skins, but like when it comes to a lot of map visuals, it's like it doesn't change as much. No. So it's kind of cool to revisit it for once, to actually see that. What is your favorite map visually?
It's Hanamura, actually.
I love Hanamura. I don't think you'd be in the minority there.
Yeah,
it's a gorgeous
map. I appreciated Hanaoka being able to revisit the look of this. So I'm hoping one day we could repurpose Hanamura almost more accurately because I think that one is another one where the visual progression on it, like you're in an arcade and then you're in the city, then you're in a temple, then you cut through a beautiful
a storytelling.
It
tells a story.
And you end in a dojo. What's a better setting?
And not just a dojo, but like almost like a temple. Like it feels like a temple.
Yeah, it's a temple basically. Yeah, it's a castle, Japanese castle. So these maps are really effective at that visual progression I've been talking about, or we've been talking about. I actually. New Junk City is.
I love New Junk City. One time, so true story, I must have been an hour. I went around with like a little bit of increased movement speed on some character, and I looked in every nook and cranny. Yeah. And I found so many little funny references and little details, and I'm like, there's just like, whether it was graffiti or like, there's like, what is that piece of food doing there? Just like random crud thrown in. And I think that the thing that always makes it really appealing to me, again, is like everyone's a role player. It's just a sense of immersion. It feels like that East versus West visually, but really, truly, this is a real world. Like this has been lived in. There are people here. They might not be there right now, but they're there, and it's fascinating. It reminds me. Have you ever seen as a kid, I loved I Spy books.
Yes.
And they're so visually appealing, and there's something very eerie about everything looks real and lived in, but there's just nobody there right now.
Yeah.
And I get the same impression from so many of the Overwatch maps, whether it's Midtown, where it feels very visceral. It's just empty, and so it's eerie and beautiful at the same time.
Right.
Sorry, I interrupted. New Junk City. You were talking about New Junk City.
It's my other favorite map, but this comes from. Generally, our maps are pretty linear. There's a path ultimately that you travel on, and so what kind of makes fun for artists on flashpoints is you get to spread out a bit.
Sure.
It's not a linear path.
Sure.
But think about everything we just talked about, and how do we do navigation lighting if we don't know the direction as well anymore? Or how do we teach the player that they're in a new section of the world?
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
And you don't know.
And Flashpoint, it's like a little, almost like a microcosm or like a little microbiome, and of each point, it's like a slightly different aesthetic.
Yes, right. Yeah, in order to achieve those same results, you can see on India as well, Suravasa.
Yes.
There's purple area, yellow area, blue area, orange area. This is very much on purpose to try to help with some of the navigational, but it's ultimately pretty difficult in this fast-paced game.
You wonder again how much of it actually contributes behind the subconscious of like people will look at the architecture as the first thing that's distinct, but ultimately the color thing probably does contribute a great deal to being able to differentiate between points.
Yeah,
which is really interesting. So maps aside, you talked about hero hitboxes, but man, that's like the most boring thing about the heroes, right? So how much of do you guys have a hand in designing how heroes look, designing, obviously the skins are the obvious one, but the animations, a good friend of mine, I believe Kyle Desange, and he does a lot of that stuff, and he made a video, I think, on Juno's animations, and it's just fascinating. So how much of that do you lead, do you have a hand in?
Yeah, I help a lot with this, but obviously I have animation directors and character art directors that we kind of team up on these type of things. But yeah, it's a big part. Design and art, we sit next to each other, but roughly, so that when we make a guy that's big, hitbox comes into play, and artists are saying, "Hey, but we want him to feel huge," and designers like, "He's gonna get shot." You make this guy this big, we need to make a box big enough for him that he will take a lot of damage. So there's a ton of conversation like that. Even when we start to make skins, you'll change the silhouette on a guy, and a designer will come by. It's like, what happened to Juno's helmet? We're like, it looks cooler without it, So we've bended a little bit where we let some of that go without sacrificing the gameplay. But yeah, these are constant conversations for us.
Right. Yeah. It feels like the perfect storm of like competitive integrity, artistic integrity, artistic freedom, and like sometimes they're gonna go in different directions.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, remember there's all these conversations about these conspiracy theories about. I mean, there was an actual one with, I think it was the football Reinhardt skin a long time ago. The shatter voice line was like not there. You just shattered faster. So it's like, it sounded cool, but it was like a huge competitive advantage. So it's like, it's always that question of like, there was even some conspiracy theory. Oh, don't use the Widowmaker skin with the red hair because it makes it easier to see. It's like people are like min-maxing everything. It was super funny.
Curious you say that. We actually try to use red pretty rare.
I've noticed that.
Yeah. Right. So that's why that skin probably stands out sometimes.
It makes sense. It makes sense. And ultimately, I feel like it doesn't have much of an issue, which is impressive. Now, for you, do you have a favorite philosophy when it comes to skins? Is there a philosophy? Is it just really anything goes as long as it fits the hitbox?
Yeah. No, it's not anything goes. There's a balance of what we find cool versus what's cute or beautiful, right? Or even sexy.
Right.
But it depends on the level of the skin. So legendary skin, we get to really revisit the character, almost model it from the ground up.
Yeah.
So try to be actually as transformative as we can be on the hero. That. If it's an IP collab skin, working with the IP holder plus us. But those are other ones where we try to be.
And that's new too. Like that's probably not some of the, I mean, I'm sure you guys had toyed around with the idea of, but like whether, I forget the first
Lego Bastion was the first
Lego
one.
Bastion.
Long ago.
I love Lego Bastion. I think it's the best Bastion skin.
Yeah.
Even down to the sound design, it's just completely different.
But yeah, and then Mythic skins, obviously we try to be as transformative as we can without breaking the game.
I get it.
Right.
I get it. There's some situations I notice with some of the mythic skins and legendary skins to weapons where sometimes it either feels like a completely reimagination of something, or sometimes just the best version of that. Like, I think there's a lot of criticism for like the Orisa mythic. Oh, it's not imaginative enough.
Yeah.
But I was kind of like, well, it's also probably the coolest armored Orisa skin there is.
Yes,
it feels
right.
like the best version of an Orisa armored skin. So I get the complaints, but also at the same time, it's like, well, it's a cool, like even if you look at the Zenyatta skin that we have, the mythic, which I think is amazing, it feels like the best of both worlds. It's not only a really cool Omnic-looking skin, but it is a
godlike version.
Yeah,
of him
exactly.
almost,
So it's not like completely unrecognizable as Zenyatta, like some of the more crazy mythics, but it's also just really, really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with Stadium, since Stadium's a little bit more like pushed and things,
I was gonna say.
I think the mindset as we go, maybe we're even more transformative than we're used to with characters and things.
And it begs the question. I don't know if you can answer this question, but third person, does that mean we're gonna have some skins with the mode?
Know that artists are very excited about third person. We've been wanting some version of that for a long time, and you know, you can see even some of the abilities already, like Reinhardt's shield. When you use it, he's in third person. Wrecking Ball, he's literally in third person half the time.
Right.
So we just like so much of our work is hidden when you're in first person. So
that's the ultimate irony. The most evolved artistic game of its time is hidden in first person.
Yes, right. You know, and so the art team is like really excited to experiment with, now that you can see the back of the character almost on everyone, what could we do? What kind of fun skins could we make, you know?
I've noticed a lot with, especially the base skins specifically, that kind of follow a pattern of, again, I'm not an artist, but it feels like, you know, primary, secondary, and then tertiary accents. Is there any sort of, again, are those just guidelines that you bend when you need to? Is there any sort of strategy when you come out with a character's color scheme, whether it's gray and green with Genji, whether it's we're looking at Reinhardt here, kind of that silver with yellow and black accents. Do you guys have a theme or approach when it comes to that?
You're spot on about those cues you catch.
Nice, all right, let's go.
So the base heroes, we try to keep it a simple, more simple palette like you just mentioned. But there's no guidelines. Once we decide to make a skin, you just break the character, basically.
Of course. It's like you learn the rules, so you can break the rules.
Yes, right, But then when we're making something that maybe it's a character that's in Overwatch and they have an Overwatch suit on, there is a guideline for that type of thing, or a talent agent, or...
it feels like people's first impression of a character needs to be very distinct.
Yes, right.
Right. Do you have a favorite character to design, whether it's the skins or just even their initial design that you feel particularly proud of?
Is Reinhardt. He's my most favorite character.
Yeah, it's a good choice. He's so distinct, visually distinct. And I think it's Overwatch too. I've been looking at the beard here in the bottom left. It's just great.
Yeah, Reinhardt and his palette, because he's such a big dude, and
he is.
You just get, there's so much to play with when it comes to skins for him. That's what sometimes makes it tough as our the uniqueness of every character kind of comes with its own problem.
Again, referencing Brian here, he was talking a lot about sound design with Wrecking Ball. And just using it as an example, he said that one of the biggest lessons that he learned was the importance of consistency with sound in terms of what the action is being done. So when it was sharing adaptive shields, it's a release of pressure. And the obvious example is healing. Healing sounds like healing. I don't know why, but it does. With visuals, Reinhardt's a great example because you don't have to guess what he does. You've never played Overwatch before, you know.
Yeah, right.
And but that's consistent. Like you look at Tracer, you look at Genji, and you look at Ashe, and you look
Cassidy,
at Ana and Cassidy, and there's a consistent theme throughout all of those. Is that harder than it looks?
It's actually very hard now. We're running out of those core archetypes. Like, here's the angel, here's the cowboy, here's the knight.
Right. Almost the caricatures. Now we're getting these this is like a postmodern literature where these complex, dynamic characters with grays, and like you're having to visually demonstrate that. How do you even do that?
So sometimes we lean in on the weapon itself. Like, for example, with Sojourn, it was a railgun fantasy. Like what?
Or Hazard with the spikes.
Yeah, Hazard with the spikes. Or Freya, the newer character, the crossbow.
Yeah,
and Bounty Hunter with the crossbow. So what's that look like? So so we do a combination of the full archetype, it's a cowboy, or it's the weapon that drives the fantasy of the hero.
Makes sense. That makes sense. So it's like if Hazard goes in a lot of different directions, like you wouldn't necessarily know that he wall climbs from the look. But the spikes it's a consistent theme, and it is a consistent theme of not only his weapon, his block, but also his wall as well. And you can kind of tell just from the visual. Do you have a favorite skin? Maybe not even a favorite, just one that is underrated that you just think is great.
One of my favorite skins is not revealed yet.
Okay, that's okay. Now that's exciting.
We learned a lot.
All right, is it a mythic or a legendary?
It's a mythic. Yeah.
It's a mythic. Okay, well, we'll hang tight.
But one of my favorite skins. There's two of them. It's a silly one. It's 76 and it's apron.
The dad one?
Yeah, the dad one.
The Grill Master 76?
Yeah, Grill Master 76.
I've seen that one cosplayed so many times. Yeah, it is phenomenal. God, socks and sandals.
And the other one is the silly Torbjorn with the pool party.
The bathing suit?
The pool party. Torbjorn.
I've seen way too many fan versions of that skin. I've seen way too much Torbjorn skin. That is also a personal favorite. I use both of those skins, so that's great. That's great. I think those are just where you can really just get silly with it.
Yeah, for silly skins, those are some of my favorite. But then Reinhardt, I'm still a huge fan of the Blackheart skin we did in Overwatch.
Oh, I love Blackheart. Right. I love. There was a Blackheart and there was the red version, I think, as well.
Both versions
red
are
with
fantastic.
gold. I love. We were doing. I don't know if you were familiar with SVB. And we years ago we did a skin tier list of different characters, and I think it was like Ryan, Genji, Widow, Diva, like Mercy, like so many good skins.
Yeah.
I think the armored characters you can do so many things.
The range is so much easier to work with sometimes.
Do you feel like that's the case with some of those? Because I noticed that I think I realized at first when with Overwatch League skins, and I was like, which characters look good with Overwatch League skins? It's Widow and characters with armor. Do you feel like that's the case with characters in general with skins? Some characters are just easier to make and some are not.
It's always tougher for some characters, but I don't think it's because of their armor or things like that. Sometimes we want to make sure it makes sense. Sometimes we like to imagine that what would Reinhardt want to wear? We think of his personality. And
that's actually great.
It's kind of silly, but that's how we start sometimes. It's just like, Reinhardt, would he do this? Like, is he asking himself, how silly will he get, or how cool does he want to be?
Yeah.
Even with the IP collabs, we imagine that the heroes actually watch the shows or they watch the animes, and they personally want to cosplay as that hero.
I never thought about that.
It's kind of silly, but that's how we kind of go.
Again, it's like that's the visual consistency with the story. I mean, we talked about that with the maps, right? With Route 66, it's not just a good map design; it tells a story.
It tells a story,
and so the skin itself is not just it looks cool, but maybe it gives you a little bit of insight about what that character is like.
Yeah.
Even I think I look at the immediate example is like the Overwatch 2 reimagination of the Genji skin, where he just feels more casual.
Yes, right. Yeah.
He's just kind of like he's a little bit more experienced, a little bit more sober, or maybe even a little bit more relaxed would be the better term. If he's like, he's been around the block.
Yeah,
he's okay with that.
But Thor Reinhardt is my most favorite skin. If I narrow it down, the mythic skin.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's especially really good.
Gold and black variant.
You guys have done a really good job with a lot of the mythic's color variety. Where it used to be for me, it was always like, I think this is the best color variation, and now I'm like, I kind of like that color variation. I kind of like that color variation, which is...
You choose a different one each.
Yeah, it completely almost feels like a different skin. It feels like you're getting multiple mythics for the price of one. We talked about maps. We talked about characters. Is there anything else that the art team does that maybe isn't so obvious? Maybe I'm just forgetting an entire topic.
I think the UI and UX experience, especially when you're playing, there's a lot of information that needs to be told through visual effects plus UI.
That might be one of your best things. Like even little things like the DPS passive, like it's incredible like how simple that solution was and yet how well it works.
Our VFX team recently did a thing where you might have noticed it now when Lucio has the ability on you, you can see
the green glow for speed.
Yeah, you can see the glow.
And that's new. What, 2 years? 2 or 3 years? Recent, very recent. I think.
Yeah, like two seasons ago, I think.
Oh, even
a couple seasons ago.
I think there's a slow visible with purple. Is it? There's a slow as well, and that's new too.
So we're trying to showcase, and it's actually visual effects, but it's technically UI information too. It's teaching you what's happening to your character or what's happening to the other guy. So the visual effects in the game, they play a big part in like. Zarya bubble looks intense, right? Like you don't want to get in that thing, So we had to make sure it looks sharp and spiky and dangerous, So that it teaches you like don't go there. It's not inviting.
Right? Yeah. Actually, I didn't think about that. So it's not just like the hitboxes and the skins, but also the way that the abilities look manifests like their lethality or whatever. Are there any other examples of like abilities that I guess wouldn't be immediately obvious that they visually represent what they do?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think here.
There's obviously Sigma's little once he does his ultimate, that little
you
kind of don't want to be in it. When you start to see it, you're like, let me get out of this this spot.
You guys did that recently with, I think, Juno ult. I think the first iteration of Juno ult, when you were in it, it didn't feel as visceral. And then I think I gave some feedback, and a lot of people gave some feedback, and now it feels like when you're in Juno ult, it feels like you're like in a cryostasis chamber, like supercharged, like, you know, it's like, it's crazy.
This was good feedback everyone gave. That's why we like, once you get the game out and just hear what people say. Because, generally when you start to see something, you want to run away from it. And so Juno, we didn't quite have it where it felt like, no, you're safe staying inside this one. If May's Blizzard starts happening, you're like,
exactly,
get out of here. Right. But now Juno was the opposite. It's this thing you can be in and be safe. You know?
It's like a reminder of like, hey, stay in this. This is good for you. You should be in here.
And we didn't want to copy Zenyatta's like kind of transcendence.
Right.
So he has the warm kind of.
There's more happening too, because it's both the damage boost and the heal.
Exactly.
So it's like that's a lot of complicated variables kind of happening at once, and being able to communicate that. I think even damage boost now, like the blue glow, right? That's you can again feel the damage boost, you know, without actually seeing it on the UI.
This is why we're excited about third person too. You can see those effects even more.
I'm excited to see where it goes.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time, chat. Please give him a thanks, and we really appreciate your work. I think everybody in chat is a huge fan of all of your work, and we talk about design and balance and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, none of it matters without this.
Awesome.
You know,
thank you. And any feedback you have along the way, you see some funky art, just send it our way.
Appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Okay, you too. See you guys. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right. Well, that was super cool. I was not expecting that. That was a pleasant surprise. Hopefully, I wasn't being too. I wasn't sure who was going to be interviewing today, and so obviously there's been some surprises. So I've tried to be accommodating and try to ask questions that people that are as invested in art as I would have wished me to ask. So I hope I didn't miss any obvious ones there, because obviously it's, especially when I was in the middle of playing a game, I was like, frick, this is rough. But I definitely don't have to pretend interest, that's for sure. Yes, thank you. Have a good rest of it, because like there's so much. I mean, I talked about it like initially, like that really was why I got into the game. You know, is like how cool and how not only how the characters looked, but how they felt. You know, and that kind of comes back to art. So.